today we'll be doing a webinar on what you need to know about Google Analytics 360 in 2019. So I have some what I think are pretty exciting slides to go through, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I really enjoy talking about Google Analytics 360. It's something that I specialize in, but we hear a lot of people that do use Google Analytics. They're just huge proponents, huge fans of the tool. So anytime we can kind of geek out together, I think that's a good thing. So let's go ahead and get started. I will introduce myself. My name is Andy Gibson. I am the head of vertical over here at InfoTrust. I'm a Google Marketing Platform expert, so I have a lot of experience with Google Analytics 360, Google Tag Manager, Optimize, Data Studio, and all of those products within that marketing suite. I've worked with some of the largest companies and brands in the world to improve their digital analytics knowledge and capabilities. Also done a ton of training programs for our clients across the world, but also with our own internal employees here at InfoTrust, which is something that I really enjoy doing. I've been using Google Analytics 360 since it was first available as Google Analytics Premium. Many of you probably have not heard of Google Analytics Premium. That's what it was actually referred to or called when it first came out. I think it was 2012 or 2011, something around there. And then I also am an adjunct professor at UC, so any questions on that, let me know. But let's get into the good stuff. So the company that I work for is called InfoTrust. We are a independent digital analytics consultancy in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we have offices in Chicago, Barcelona, and Dubai. Really what we pride ourselves on is helping organizations become data confident and increasing their return on digital investment through a number of our products that we offer and then also services as well. So we are experts in the Google Marketing Platform. Of course, we're Google Analytics certified partners and Google Analytics 360 sales partners, which is basically we're Google Analytics 360 resellers. A little bit about our differentiation before we get into the meat of the presentation. So we do build our own products. We have our own product called taginspector.com if anyone's checked it out. We have a ton of experience with a lot of the larger companies across the globe. We have, as I mentioned, global support across a lot of different offices. We're tag management system agnostic, so we don't focus on just one. We have experience with all of them. ROI is our top priority, and we're trusted advisors. So we have really good relationships with our clients, and those are generally ongoing relationships. Now, as we're talking about Google Analytics 360 today, we get this question a ton, do we need Google Analytics 360? Is it necessary for us? That's really a hard question for us to answer. So I'm going to be talking about Google Analytics 360 today and some of the features that have been announced in the last year, where I think the tool is going, in the next couple of years. But really, when we get this question, it's almost like, okay, well, let us ask 10 more questions of you because we need more information. So really what we try to do is oversimplify what we call an analytics maturity model. And so in this case, we usually walk the companies through this kind of crawl, walk, run phase. And so our business development guy, Brad, who's awesome, if any of you know him, Brad Pringer, he has kind of coined this, and it's really the easiest way that we can find to talk about it. For us, when we get that question, what is Google Analytics 360? Do we need Google Analytics 360? Really, we put them the onus back on the client or the prospect and say, where do you think you are right now? Generally, a lot of the companies that we first start talking with are going to be in that crawl phase, and really the focus for them is getting their analytics priorities up and running, right? Getting their team together, trying to figure out what tools they're using, what tools are necessary. For those people, and we certainly work with people in this phase as well, for these people, generally an enterprise analytics tool like Google Analytics 360 isn't really going to be the most important. You need to have those initial processes, the people, all that set up prior to investing in something as expensive as an enterprise kind of like application. Now, a lot of the clients that we work with generally are going to be in that walk phase or between the crawl and walk. Really, for us, our purpose and our main goal is to move you from whatever phase you're in, ultimately to that end phase, which is the running phase. And this is some of the examples of things that we've done with clients in that running phase. So in looking at this, generally, if you're first starting out with something, if you're in that crawl phase, that's typically where you're going to be able to use the free version of Google Analytics or whatever web analytics tool you're using and still get the most out of it. Now, when you run into some of the kind of like larger companies, that are running into limits with the amount of traffic they're getting or needing a service level agreement and things like that, we can definitely talk about GA360. But what we like to do is kind of take our prospects through this and say, where are you on this list right now? Let us help you with that to get you to where you need to be to implement something like a Google Analytics 360. So of course, we want all of our clients to get to that run phase. This is where that digital analytics is going to be able to provide the most value to your organization. That's really our end goal. But just realize to get there, you need to first be both crawling and then walking. All right, so what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about how Google Analytics has progressed over the years. We'll talk about what's new with GA360, and so this is like probably in the last year or so, what companies are actually focusing on in 2019 and how that relates to Google Analytics 360. And then I'll talk about also what to expect in the future for the product. We also have some exciting stuff coming from InfoTrust over the next couple of months. So I also have a few slides on that, which we're hoping we get you all excited about and signed up for. So without further ado, let's talk about Google Analytics' unofficial history real quick. In this case, I put unofficial here because I don't want to get sued by anyone if I left something out. But interesting enough, it's probably not well known that Google Analytics actually started out as a product called Urchin. So that was a web statistical analysis program that was actually created by a company called Urchin Software Corporation. Google Analytics came about because they actually purchased Urchin Software Corp in April of 2005. Within that year, that same year, November of that year, Google actually launched Google Analytics based on that Urchin software. And so the software at the time was urchin.js. February 2006, Google acquired a company called MeasureMap, and they were pretty much a web analytics tool for bloggers. And so that MeasureMap team actually worked with the Google team to redesign the entire version of Google Analytics. And so once they were acquired, they worked on that, and then they launched a brand new redesigned version in May of 2007. September of 2011, Google announced Google Analytics Premium, which is what we're going to be talking about mostly today, called Google Analytics 360 now, but that's the enterprise paid version of Google Analytics. And I will actually talk about here in a few slides the difference between Google Analytics and Google Analytics 360, but it is important to note, prior to 2011, Google Analytics did not have a premium or enterprise tier. It was just a free tier. Now, October of 2012, for all of you that have been using GA for a while, Google actually released Universal Analytics, which was a new beta version of Google Analytics, and the tracking library for you nerds is analytics.js. April 2014, Google announced that Universal Analytics is finally out of beta. It was a very long time. We got a lot of questions about that at the time. How long is Universal Analytics going to be in beta? And we just kept on saying, we're not sure, we will let you know. October 2014, Google acquired Firebase, which was a mobile app development platform. March 2016, Google then released Google Analytics 360, which was an actual platform, a suite of digital marketing products, and that included Analytics 360. So you'll hear me talk about Google Analytics in different terms. So GA is short for Google Analytics, or if I say GA360, Google Analytics 360. Analytics 360 is also another way to say GA360. It's a little bit confusing, but I will stick with GA and GA360. Google actually announced in May of 2016 that Firebase, announced Firebase, which they basically revamped and turned into their mobile app platform, and that actually features Firebase Analytics for app measurement. October of 2017, Google released Global Site Tag, which a lot of you might know now, because you'll probably see this if you're trying to create a new Google Analytics property. That is their newest version of Google Analytics to actually unify the tagging system and simplify their implementation. June 2018, Google introduced the Google Marketing Platform, which was basically the rebranded effort of Google Analytics 360, but it also included a couple of the rebranded DoubleClick products. So we'll introduce those here in a minute too. And then December of 2018, so a couple months ago, Google then emailed customers that are actually using Google Analytics for mobile app SDKs, letting them know that Firebase Analytics is going to be the de facto Google App Analytics tool moving forward. So there's a plan in place for deprecating Google Analytics for mobile app SDKs. If you just search for that on Google, there will be some information on that, but Google will also update everyone as we find more about that. Robin, I appreciate your question. Are we ever going to get to the point of this webinar? Yes, we will. I appreciate that. All right, so the differences you can see in the interface, we have then 2007 and now 2019. Pretty big difference, right? It's pretty remarkable the actual differences that have gone into place since Google Analytics and Google Analytics 360 first came out. A lot of the questions we get around GA and GA 360 are the differences between them. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you'll see that there are major differences mainly around the actual data that can be collected, the number of custom dimensions you can use, some of the integrations and things like that. If you have any more questions on that, please let me know. I have my email address at the very end for you guys that are interested. Another thing that we also notice a lot of times is that when we're working with clients to roll out an enterprise application like GA360, there's going to be a certain amount of features that are just never going to be used. So it's very important to have in place a partner or an internal team that's going to be able to basically adopt and implement that product across the entire organization. One of the things we see a lot of times is people that are not ready to implement a enterprise tool like Google Analytics 360 will buy it and then use, very few of the actual features and then come back and say, what have we accomplished with this product? And we'll say, well, we've done everything that you've asked us to do. We mentioned all these other things and those weren't really interesting at the time. We didn't get to that. So for us, we want to make sure that when we implement a tool like Google Analytics 360 across the organization, that you're able to take advantage of all of the features that it provides. So we actually focus on a model that's called the 6 Ps of digital analytics transformation. Michael Lobin from our team has actually coined this phrase. It's been in Forbes and Forrester. So we'll, if you have any questions on this, let me know, but we do have a lot of content on the internet around that. So you can definitely search for that. And then for that piece, for actually implementing Google Analytics 360 across the organization, it's important to have a partner that's going to be able to do that for you. And so that's where we come in as resellers. I'm not going to go through all of this, but with GA360, you do get a lot of benefits, but then also you get our support, our account management, our training, and then our ongoing support to make sure that you're taking them GA360 the most, you're getting the most out of Google Analytics 360. All right, so when we're talking about Google Analytics 360 and what are the newest features, the latest features, the most interesting to us, we have a few things that we're going to talk about here. So one is just the overall Google Marketing Platform and the creation of that. We'll talk about Google Signals, the Salesforce Integration, in-store visits, which is very, very interesting, advanced analysis within the Google Analytics interface, conversion probability, which is a new metric that's been introduced within Google Analytics, along with session quality, which is another metric, the single search functionality within the interface, the intelligence assistance, which I think is one of the coolest pieces of Google Analytics, and then also user management and user groups really for the enterprise. So these are the things that we're going to talk about now. These are the newest kind of features and functionalities with GA360. So let's get into this. Now, one, we talked about Google Analytics 360, the kind of suite of products that were announced in 2016. Well, in June of 2018, Google actually introduced the Google Marketing Platform, which actually combined that Google Analytics 360 platform along with the rebranded DoubleClick products. In this case, you can see here for the Google Marketing Platform, we got Display and Video 360, which is actually a rebranded version of DoubleClick Bid Manager, Campaign Manager, and some other of the DoubleClick products. Search Ads 360, which is DoubleClick Search, and then you have Analytics 360, Data Studio, Optimize 360, Surveys, and Tag Manager. So all of these rolled up into one. Now we have basically the Google Analytics 360 platform plus a lot of those DoubleClick products. One of the nice things about the Google Marketing Platform is that a lot of these actual tools integrate with each other, of course, because they're all Google products. So there's a very tight integration with things like Google Analytics 360 and Tag Manager. Google Analytics 360 and Data Studio, Google Analytics 360 and Optimize 360, and so on. So that's really one of the key benefits to moving those DoubleClick products within a platform, is that now they all talk together really well and can be integrated pretty quickly. Now, one of the next things that you might not have actually noticed is Google introduced what they call as Google Signals. So really, the concept behind Google Signals is they're associating visit information to your site with the Google accounts of signed in users who have actually consented to that information. When we're talking about consented to that information, basically it's ad personalization. So within your Google account, you can actually turn on or off that ad personalization. I think mine by default was set at on, but you can also go in there manually and turn it off. Now, the way this actually works is if you think about how Google Analytics tracks data and tracks users by default, it's going to actually be based on browser cookies. So if you're using two separate browsers, but on the same machine, you're going to be two separate people. Now, there's really no way around that unless you're using something like a login/user ID option. So someone logs in on your site, you can know they're logged in on their desktop and on their, let's say, iPad. That's fairly easy to set up. The issue comes when people are not logged into your site or you don't have a login capability. Think about a big publisher that gets a lot of generic traffic to the site. No one really logs in. They don't really have a subscription model. So you're going to get a ton of anonymous visitors. In this case, what Google is actually able to do is, as long as someone is signed in on that device to a Google account, that can be Gmail, it can be Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Maps, any of those free products, Google will be able to tell if you visit the site, and then if you're logged in on another device with your Google account, they'll be able to essentially stitch those two devices together. So if I log into, let's say, my Gmail on both my laptop and on my iPhone, Google is going to know that, okay, this device is Andy's and this device is Andy's. So now when I visit, let's say, Macy's.com, it knows that behind the scenes, I'm the same person. So it's actually deduping users based on Google's knowledge graph, what they call Google Signals. So that's a pretty cool thing to do. It's very proprietary, obviously, because it involves Google's actual data on people. They're not sending anything personally identifiable into Google Analytics, of course, but this is a way around some of these kind of cookie-based issues that you'll run into with web analytics tracking. I believe you actually have to enable Google Signals at the property level. So if you haven't done that, definitely take a look. If you just do a quick Google Analytics, Google Signals search, you'll find the documentation on how to get that set up. One of the more exciting announcements is that Salesforce has actually been integrated with Google Analytics. This is a Google Analytics 360 only feature, but Google and Salesforce actually announced a strategic partnership to create these integrations between the two products. So we've gotten a lot of requests for this type of integration in the past. We've actually done a lot of manual ones ourselves, and Google actually wrote a case study with us for one we did on Pelican water systems. So if you're interested, definitely Google search that. But this one is actually a native integration. So as long as you have Google Analytics 360 and then, of course, Salesforce, you can actually set up the integration pretty much through the interface. So that actual integration has 4 components. So there is sales data from the Sales Cloud. So that's the Salesforce Sales Cloud is then available in Google Analytics 360. So you can use that for things like attribution, bid optimization, and audience creation. Data from GA360 will be available in the Google Marketing Cloud reporting UI, so you can understand that complete campaign performance. Audiences are created in GA360, and those will be available in Marketing Cloud for activation. So you can use things like direct marketing, email, SMS, and then customer interactions from the Marketing Cloud will also be made available in Analytics 360 for use in creating audience lists. So you can create those audience lists in GA, send those over to Google Ads, send those over to Display and Video 360, however you're targeting your different customers. So this is a huge integration, and this is definitely one of the ones that we get the most questions on. So a ton of people are interested in this. If you guys use Salesforce, definitely check this out. A lot of information online about this, and if you want any more, let us know. Another feature, and this has been, I can't remember exactly when this was in the last year, but this is still in beta. It's called in-store visits. And so this is really cool to some, really creepy to others. But basically what Google Analytics is able to do, it allows you to see how many people visit your website and then visit your physical location, so your physical stores. In this case, this is actually made possible a few different ways. One, the users have to have their location history on. They have to opt into the advertising stuff that we were talking about. But you also have to have, from the business side of things, you have to have Google My Business set up as well, so it knows specifically where your businesses are. But once you have all that set up, you're able to then take advantage of this. So the actual store visits are estimates based on the actual data from users who actually have that location history turned on. It's aggregated and anonymized. You don't have to worry about any PII going anywhere, but it is extremely helpful and extremely interesting for people that are running a ton of paid advertising and things like that. You want to know if people do see your paid ad, come to your site, but then ultimately come to your store to actually take some type of action. So extremely interesting. Google's still making updates to this, of course, as it's still in beta. But if you haven't read about this, definitely check that out. Now, one of my favorite things within Google Analytics 360 recently has been what they call the advanced analysis section. So these are actually a suite of reports that allow you to do a few different things, but it's like on the fly report building essentially. There are some powerful techniques that you can actually use. So there are three main types of reports you can use: exploration, funnel analysis, and segment overlap. The two images, the top one is funnel analysis, the bottom one is segment overlap. But these are, if you are in the interface for Google Analytics, they'll show up under advanced analysis on the left side navigation. But these allow you to basically slice and dice data, create reports very quickly by dragging and dropping dimensions, metrics, filters, segments, and get to some really nice looking reports pretty quickly. So if you haven't seen these, definitely check these out, but these have been extremely popular with our clients. One of the other nice things about the funnel analysis is it actually holds up to 10 funnel steps. So for any of you that have GA360 and have run into the custom report funnels where it stops at, I think it's 5 steps or 7 steps, with advanced analysis, the actual funnel analysis you can build are up to 10 steps, which is nice. Now, the next two actually are actual new metrics that are available within Google Analytics. So one is called conversion probability. This one's still in beta, but it's basically a forward-looking estimate of the future likelihood of conversions for an individual user. So Google actually makes this metric available to you, and you can see in the screenshot below, there's this kind of like buckets of percentage conversion probabilities. So these ranges, 0 to 1, 2 to 5, and then 6 to 20, 21 to 50. Those are percentages. So people are actually bucketed into those probability buckets, and you can see how many people fall into each one of those. Now, the main use case for this is going to be around segmenting and remarketing. Sure, it's nice to look at for reporting, but you want to actually be able to take action on this. So from Google Analytics' perspective, you can create audiences with people that have a very high conversion probability to drive some type of remarketing campaign. For people with a low conversion probability, you can actually use those to remove those types of people from your campaigns moving forward, because of course they have a very low conversion probability. We don't want to pay for those people to see our ads and click on them if they're not going to actually convert. So there are actually some requirements to getting started with this. One is that you have to have 1,000 e-commerce transactions a month. You also have to have 30 days of data for it to actually use. But in that case, as long as you hit those two requirements, it assumes you have fairly high quality data and will then start servicing this conversion probability metric. So pretty cool. There is also a newer metric called session quality. And so this is actually really interesting. So Google actually uses machine learning to calculate a session quality dimension. There's also an average session quality metric as well, to estimate a user's proximity to conversion. So this is more this is more of a look back metric versus the one we just talked about, which was more future looking, but the user engagement is actually evaluated for each session. The resulting proximity to conversion, that's expressed as a score of 1 to 100. And of course, 1's being the furthest from conversion, 100 being the closest. In that case, you can actually use this then to understand the session quality scores based on things like the traffic sources that are driving people to those, the specific campaigns, and really this is more of a way to judge the actual campaign value to your business. So two very interesting metrics that were released in the last probably 6 to 7 months. So definitely if you haven't used these, check those out. But both of these actually require that you have conversions set up. Now, one of the other cool things is you've probably noticed this if you've been in GA within the last probably month or so, but their search bar now has this drop down that pulls up a couple different sections. One is it's actually creating recently browsed reports sections. So for any reports that you've been to, it kind of keeps this updated historical, I guess, section for the reports you visited. So if you want to navigate quickly back, you can. Another is you can actually use Google's machine learning and artificial intelligence to ask it questions. So we'll go over this in the next actual slide. But there's some really cool stuff that you can do with that. And Google is only going to build on this feature within GA360 over the next probably year or so. So universal search, this single search bar can do a lot of things. You can search for specific reports. You can see your recently browsed reports. And then also you can ask Google Analytics questions straight through there. Now, the other piece of that, and you can see within the screenshot, I actually asked it a question, how many users came to the site last week? It'll actually be able to answer these questions for you. So this is what Google calls intelligence assistance. Again, Google's leveraging its machine learning intelligence to actually make the tasks of monitoring data, discovering insights, and answering data questions easier. So a few things you can do. One is you can actually ask it questions by simply typing in a question into that search bar. When you do that, it opens up this little panel over here to the right side that'll show you, how many actual users or, whatever the answer to that question is. It'll also allow you to ask a follow-up question from a couple pre-selected questions here. You can see what devices have the most growth in users, etc. If you have a follow-up question based on that, you can. And you can also go to the report that's going to answer this question. So if you're new to GA, you don't know where things are located or what report you should use to get to an answer, you can ask it a question and then go to that specific report and kind of make note in your head of where everything is. Another piece of this is it'll also investigate automatically your detected anomalies in the data. So it'll go through your actual GA property and look for spikes or huge decreases in traffic and users and transactions, things like that. And it'll alert you if it does notice anything that's happening that's out of the ordinary. So it'll also surface that information for you. And that's really interesting because, of course, for someone that's doing a lot in GA, you'll probably notice some of those things, but for someone that might be in it weekly or maybe monthly, it's not as apparent to you that something like that might happen. Okay, and the last piece is user groups. So this is actually probably not too sexy for everyone on the call, but this has been extremely requested from users from pretty much the start of Google Analytics, is to be able to actually utilize group memberships to give access to a lot of the different products. So Google Analytics 360 user access is actually more or less Google Marketing Platform user access. They're all across the organization. In this case, you can actually assign user groups permissions for the entire 360 suite and for each individual product within the suite. So in this case, what we see a lot of the times is there will be like a marketing team that needs access to a new Google Analytics account. As long as you have that marketing group user set up as a user group, you can then add that user group and you don't have to go through the process of individually adding each user. Now, we also do a lot of things with automation. So for our really large clients, we have a lot of API work that we do for mass adding and deleting users, mass adding and deleting properties, making GTM and updates and stuff like that. But this is a little bit simpler in the interface for people that need to add 5, 6, 7, 8, however many users at a time, but not kind of go down that automation route. So this has definitely been helpful for the clients that we work with that have to manage a lot of that user access to be able to lump people into user groups and then control the permissions based on that. Definitely been helpful. Now let's talk about what we see companies focusing on in 2019, and then I'll tie that back to how it relates to GA360. So for a few things here, I really wanted to cover 4 main points. One is unifying customer data across the organization. One is measuring and improving customer lifetime value. Another is forecasting and predicting behavior. And then the last we'll talk about is advanced attribution. So let me go through each one of these piece by piece. For unifying customer data across the organization, this is really building that single customer view across the organization, across that company, to then be able to activate that data for something like a more personalized online experience, savings in terms of advertising spend. There's a lot of reasons why you would do this. But from your end, you probably heard the phrase single customer view, unified customer data. All of these phrases is really, this is what we're talking about here. This is having a database that has all of your marketing and advertising data in it, but it also allows you to activate that data through any of the necessary channels that we're talking about. In this case, you can see from the diagram on the right side, a lot of Google Marketing Platform's products actually fit into these areas. So GA, Tag Manager, Firebase, these are part of the kind of data collection piece. For the customer database, Google Cloud Platform and BigQuery, these two are what people generally are going to use when they're trying to build that kind of customer database. And then for the channels, you have from the Google Marketing Platform, Display and Video 360, Search Ads 360, Optimize 360, Surveys 360, and so on. All these products make up this kind of unification process, but really that happens in a database somewhere. Now, one of the other things that we see, there's really 2 parts of this. One is just de-siloing that data across the organization. So that's important to companies. How many times have you tried to pull data from, let's say all the advertising networks that you're working with? You have to go into each advertising network, request a CSV, try to merge that with the CSVs from the other ad networks. It gets to be a huge hassle. With this de-siloing of data, you're actually connecting all that data to one point, to one customer database that has everything in it. And then if you need to pull out that data for reporting purposes, you can, but you're really creating that as a way to build out customer profiles to then activate that somehow based on the data that you're actually collecting. So that's one piece of this. The second piece is actually collecting and owning first-party data. So we see this push a lot because of a few different reasons. One is GDPR compliance. So of course, companies, because they are being required by law in the EU to adhere to the GDPR and give users right to delete their data and things like that, it is important for companies to actually own this data. There's been a lot of reliance on third-party data sources over the last probably 15 years. Companies are realizing, no, we need to own this data ourselves. We can't leave it up to Apple. We can't leave it up to Google or Facebook to own that data for us, and we just request it and get whatever they give us. Another piece of this is Apple's ITP 2.1. So with this basically is going to end, and this is just for Safari browsers, but this is going to end the data collection coming from third-party tags. It's also limiting the data collection that can be done via first-party sources as well. So they are proposing with ITP 2.1 that after 7 days, any first-party cookie is actually deleted. So that's, as long as that first-party cookie can live, 7 days, it gets wiped out. Now you have a new set of data. Obviously not ideal when it comes to web analytics tools like Google Analytics, like Adobe, because you have to adhere to that or your cookies get wiped out. So this is another reason why we're seeing a lot of people wanting to own their first-party data. One is so they are compliant, they understand what data they're using, but also they want to make sure that they're getting as accurate data as possible, and they can't really be relying on those third-party data sources. The last part is networking or networks owning the user data, and we see this a lot with Facebook, with Google. Companies are starting to want to have that data themselves and manage that data themselves rather than relying on a Facebook to allow them to get impressions and ad clicks and stuff like that. That's great, but we want to understand how our customers are interacting with your platform, and we want to own that data so we can do something with it. Now, we've actually helped a number of organizations use Google Cloud Platform to actually unify their first-party customer data. So this is going to include Google Analytics data, of course, for web and app behavior, or Firebase as well, Tag Manager, because it's collecting data and sending data somewhere. And we're really doing that basically, that customer database, that building of that database, that's happening within Google Cloud Platform. And then we're then creating this activation phase where they're able to then activate that data across their different channels. So if they want to deliver a personalized experience, they can take that information, that customer data, create segments, and then use those segments for something like Google Optimize to show a specific audience or a specific segment of their customers a certain experience. Same idea with ad networks, email, push messaging, all of these, as long as you are collecting this data, this customer data, and you have that within your database, you can then take action on it to deliver much more of a one-to-one personalized experience. Now, the next piece is measuring and improving customer lifetime value. So if you've never heard the term customer lifetime value, it basically means that it's a metric that's going to predict the future value of a current customer. This is an extremely powerful metric because it can be used to tailor your marketing and advertising activities. So if you think about a company that's just using very aggregate audiences for targeting, they probably have people in there that are very low customer value to their business, kind of medium, and then very high. Now, instead of targeting everybody in our advertising, we can actually remove that lowest customer lifetime value segment, whatever that segment looks like. Now we're actually going to increase the return on our advertising spend because we've already predicted that lower advertising or that lower customer lifetime value segment is not going to purchase from us, or they're going to purchase, but it's not going to be worth much to our actual business. So there's a number of ways that you can actually use this. And we've actually worked with companies to actually send in customer lifetime value, which we're doing this through BigQuery and through R, but we send this data back into Google Analytics 360 where they then build audiences based on that customer lifetime value, and then they activate those audiences through something like Optimize 360 if they want to tailor or test a different experience, or through something like Google Ads or Display and Video 360 for remarketing. So a lot of different examples of how you can actually utilize customer lifetime value, but you first need to get to there. And so one of those big pieces is calculating that customer lifetime value across your business. Another piece is forecasting and predicting behaviors. So of course, marketers are constantly optimizing their activities, their campaigns, and we know the faster the data is available, the faster you as a marketer can make decisions, can make optimizations on that data. With forecasting, marketers can actually understand in real time or near real time a campaign's current performance and forecasted future performance. So this allows you to continually optimize your campaigns, your marketing activities for a higher return on advertising spend. That's what that ROAS means. One example how we're actually doing this, we worked with a high-end beauty retailer to actually build a forecasting engine based off of their GA360 real-time e-commerce data. So that was for intraday revenue and conversions, and that actually fed into their media buying model, and they were able to deliver a much higher return on advertising spend during their holiday campaigns. We worked on one brand, but it would actually perform so well that they rolled it out to their 7 other luxury brands. So definitely a lot of things you can do with this forecasting and predicting. And on the right-hand side, that's just an example of a dashboard that was working for them. So it predicts hour by hour where they're going to be the rest of the day based on the previous hour's totals. The last piece I want to talk about is advanced attribution. So Google Analytics by default actually uses a last non-direct click attribution. But you can also use, in the standard version, what's called the model comparison tool to understand attribution, and that's using additional models. So there's a couple of different models that you can use within the standard version to see how it's going to change the valuation of your different channels. Now with Google Analytics 360, there's a data-driven attribution model, and that uses actual data from your Google Analytics account to actually generate a custom model for assigning conversion credit. In this case, you can see the bottom right-hand corner. I'm not even sure what property this is from, but this is creating a custom data-driven attribution model based on the value of those different channels through the entire customer journey. So it's actually pretty complicated the way they go through and figure this, but the image on the right, the top right, is showing you they basically take out and add in additional channels to measure the increase or decrease in the likelihood of purchase or the conversion. And based on machine learning, they then can understand the actual value to each one of these conversion journeys. So it's pretty complicated. Google does have some good documentation on this if you want to read about specifically how they're doing this. But this will actually allow you to build a more complete and actionable view of your digital channels so that you can continue to optimize those campaigns and ultimately improve your return on advertising spend. So some really interesting stuff there. Again, if you're interested in learning more about advanced attribution, Google does have some good support docs on that. So now what to expect in the future. And so we actually do have a contract with Google. We're not allowed to talk about future releases, but I am going to walk you through some of the things that I expect to happen within GA in the Google Marketing Platform over the next year or two. One of the big pieces that we think is going to happen is just built-in artificial intelligence is going to get better and better. It's going to be used for more things within the interface. I'll walk you through that. Tighter integrations with Google products, this happens on a regular basis. So there's additional integrations that are happening, better integrations within current products. And so that's definitely something we see as being important. Google Marketing Platform plus the Google Cloud Platform is going to generate a customer data platform. I'll talk through that one, but we're starting to see a lot of companies actually building a customer data platform themselves, utilizing both the GMP and the GCP. Firebase Analytics replaces Google Analytics for mobile apps. Of course, we've talked about that, but I'll talk about another piece of that. And then my favorite part that I've talked about for probably the last 2 years is the elimination of sampling within the actual interface in Google Analytics 360. So the first piece, more built-in artificial intelligence. One of the things that we're seeing is Google, with their infinite knowledge, their advanced AI, machine learning capabilities from things like Google Assistant, we think that Google is actually going to build in a more active Google Analytics Assistant into the product. And so what this means is a few things. It can actually answer contextual follow-up questions to you. Right now, if you ask it a question, how many users came from China last week, and then you try to ask it a follow-up question, it doesn't have that context to answer your follow-up question. It doesn't save that context from its previous answer. But this is definitely something that's coming down the road. So actually asking contextual follow-up questions, that'll be one. The build dashboards and reports, I think this is super interesting. So we get a lot of requests for building pretty simple dashboards and custom reports and things like that to report on things like the top 10 authors or the top 10 pages or something like that. It's definitely possible that Google is going to understand that, or at least your Google Analytics property is going to understand that and be able to surface reports that it's generated for you before you actually have to go in there and ask. Another piece of this is actually making recommendations on how to optimize campaigns. So this will probably be limited to only Google products, so Google Ads, any of the DoubleClick products. But in this case, it'll actually be able to make recommendations. You need to take money out of this budget and place it in this budget, or take money out of this specific campaign and put it over here. I definitely think that's coming down the road. Google actually has a product called Attribution 360 that builds on Google Analytics' attribution capabilities. That's not fully released yet, so it's still kind of in a private beta, but that is definitely coming down the road, and it does a little bit of that for you. Also, just building out those alerts a little bit more. So right now, Google Analytics will alert you if it sees basically predefined alerts. So you have to set up these alerts. If traffic drops 100%, day over day, email us. Now, what I think it's going to ultimately do is be able to tell you that on a much quicker basis, so it's not going to wait a day. It's going to tell you within an hour or two, but also it's going to do this without you actually having to set up the alert. So if it notices a huge decrease in traffic, it's able to notify you, hey, we saw last hour that traffic dropped, 200%. We had expected to be here at this time during the day. It's here. There's something that you need to look into. I think this is definitely the logical next step for artificial intelligence, is to start doing some of that. The next piece is tighter integrations with Google products. So with this one, this is going to be building on the connections that are already there, but it's going to then build into their TensorFlow, which is kind of like their machine learning platform that is open source. Firebase, of course, they're continually adding tighter integrations between Google Analytics and Google Firebase, AdMob, which is their app advertising platform, and then Data Studio. So these are just a few of the products, but I anticipate Google is going to have tighter integrations with all of its current products, but also newer products as well. I also put Salesforce down there. Salesforce is obviously not a Google product, but I wanted to mention this, that right now the integration with GA360 and Salesforce definitely has 4 components of those, but there is definitely more to be added. So Google is continually working on that Salesforce integration to be able to send additional data, take additional action on that. And so we definitely see that as being crucial over this next probably 6 to 9 months. There are definitely going to be pieces of that Salesforce integration that are going to be built out more. There's also potential for other products similar to Salesforce. So if you think about some of the products in that space, you have Salesforce, but then you have Oracle products like Eloqua, other products, Marketo, and some of these. It's always possible that Google could start adding in native support for those as well. The next piece I wanted to talk about is just this concept of a customer data platform. So I showed you guys an example of kind of that entire data flow, creating that one single user profile. That's definitely possible through Google Marketing Platform and the Google Cloud Platform. So the Google Cloud Platform is going to be able to be that database for your customer data, where all of your data coming from the Google Marketing Platform, so coming from Google Analytics, Firebase, Search Ads, Optimize, all those feed into your Google Platform, and that's really treated as your customer data platform. So from there, you can activate all of that data that you have. You know, we want to create audiences for our highest lifetime value customers and send them a 20% off for being loyal, or something like that. We can handle all of that through Google's products like the marketing platform and the cloud platform. So over the next probably year, I see a lot more tighter integrations built into this with a lot of the customer data platforms out there like BlueConic, like Telium. They are pretty easy to get set up and running pretty quickly. I think it's only a natural progression for Google to build this marketing platform and cloud platform together closer, so that you can actually get up and running with this very quickly for a customer data platform as well. Firebase Analytics, as I've mentioned, is actually going to replace Google Analytics for mobile apps. I think that's well known now, or at least it should be well known now that I've mentioned it. So Firebase Analytics is going to be that de facto app analytics platform moving forward for Google. Now, I actually eventually see Firebase Analytics becoming part of the Google Marketing Platform, which is not currently, but also being integrated within the GA interface for that official app tracking platform. I kind of curious as to why it's not happened so far, but I think the kind of first step was to deprecate the Google Analytics for mobile apps SDKs. But in this case, what you're going to see is Google is placing a very high priority on getting everybody moved over to Firebase. So it's only going to be logical that at a certain point, Google Analytics and Firebase are going to be married into one. And then my last favorite topic is the elimination of sampling in the interface. So if you've ever run into sampling in the interface, you're going to see with standard properties, it happens at 500,000 sessions. Within GA360 properties, right now the limit is 100 million sessions. So of course, much higher limit for GA360 versus GA standard. Now, my hope and what I've heard before from Google is ultimately for Google Analytics 360, there's not going to be any sampling in the interface. That's their end goal. Now, how soon that can actually happen, I'm not sure, but my hope is within the next year or two, we'll get to the point where there is no sampling in the interface for Google Analytics 360 customers. I think Google is, on a regular basis, updated that that sampling limit to continue to be higher and higher. It's only natural that the next progression eventually is going to be just unsampled data within the interface. So I'm excited for that because I know we've gotten a lot of questions on this before, and I keep on saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It's been about 2 years now, so I'm hoping at one point I can go back and say, hey, it finally came, but it'll be probably 5 years afterwards. But this is definitely something I'm excited to see. All right, so that's everything I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully that wasn't too much. For everyone asking, are we going to get a copy of the recording and a copy of the deck. Yes, I mentioned at the start, we'll be emailing you guys out with a copy of the recording and also a copy of the deck. So if you have any questions, my email address is at the very end of this, so you can email me definitely. We also have a couple very exciting events coming up for InfoTrust. One thing I wanted to mention is we have a webinar series called the Spring of Google Analytics 360. That's going to be from March to June of this year. If you're interested in signing up for that, the URL is down below. It's infotrust.com/spring of GA 360. So that's in there. We also have what we're calling the Google Analytics 360 Roadshow presented by InfoTrust. We actually have a few of our employees that are going to be going around the United States and doing some presentations with this roadshow event. The main presentation is around growing e-commerce and direct-to-consumer business with GA360, but this is also a great opportunity if you're in the neighborhood to network with other Google Analytics 360 professionals or anybody else in the digital analytics industry. So if you want dates and registration information, you can visit infotrust.com/roadshow-2019. Definitely look forward to seeing you guys out for that. And then last but not least, we have an upcoming Tag Inspector webinar series. And this is coming from our Tag Inspector product manager, Lucas Long. He'll be discussing the current privacy and compliance environment. So basically data collection in the current privacy environment. So if you're interested in signing up for that, go to taginspector.com/events. That is it for us. So if you have any questions, we have about 8 minutes left. Any questions on what we talked about today, feel free to shoot those into the question panel. For everyone asking, yes, you will get a copy of the recording and the deck. I will give everyone a minute if there are any questions and get those answered. All right, we did get one question so far. What is the cost of Google Analytics 360? That is a great question. Our typical answer to that is it's usually going to be $150,000 a year. That's for the lowest tier of GA360. That still comes with the SLA, with our support. Really, it depends on a number of factors. So for the most accurate, I guess, for the most accurate quote, we'd recommend reaching out to us, and we'll have a conversation with kind of what you have in place so far, where you are, and what you might need. We can get you a better estimate. But if you do any searching online, you'll find 150,000 is the base level there. One of the other questions we got, looks like the last question we got is, how do you get buy-in from executives for such a large enterprise product? That is another great question. Really, the way that we present it to companies and to their management is, of course, a lot of it's going to be based on return on investment. It's very tough to measure a return on investment just for implementing something like a web analytics tool. You can say, you know, we've collected this much data, we can do this with reporting, but that doesn't necessarily tie to the bottom line. So what we try to do is discuss both the problems and pain points that you're having and how we're going to solve those with that product, but also we look for ways to present an actual ROI on that. We've done this a number of ways. If we're working with your advertising teams, the amount of data that we're sending into GA now that you can use for things like removing people from your remarketing lists, therefore increasing your return on advertising spend, that's a really easy way to present some of that and to show, hey, you know, by having Google Analytics 360, by allowing us to collect 150 custom dimensions, we were able to build remarketing lists that removed, you know, our bottom 20% of people that we were actually targeting and improved our return on advertising spend by, you know, 50% or something like that. That's a very tangible, easy thing to take to someone and say, you know, we've already paid for the product just by doing this one little activity with your remarketing list. So there's a lot of different ways to present that. Again, it's pretty hard to just come up with a de facto number what that return on investment is going to look like, but there are a number of ways that we can present that to get executive buy-in. So great question. Definitely thanks for asking that. I think that was the last question. I had another comment from Amin, superb webinar. Appreciate it, Amin. But I will hang on the line here for another minute or two if anyone has additional questions. But feel free to shoot me an email at agibson@infotrust.com and I can answer any of your questions.